Please.
You talk about identifying something that is outside of yourself. Sometimes you have a problem identifying, like let's say you just know you're angry or you know you're irritated.
Right.
And you're trying to identify why you're irritated or why you're angry, but you can't really articulate it or you can't really get to it. So is there like a process or a method or things you can do to help you identify that?
You mean identify that you are angry or identify the source of your anger, the reason?
The reason.
I think that the 3-2-1 doesn't really concern itself with the cause or the reason or the source necessarily. It's just interested in the phenomenon and how to work with the phenomenon. So that's an important point, actually, that it doesn't really necessarily get at why. Although, sometimes you find that when you do the 3-2-1, it'll answer that question. Suddenly you'll get, oh, I get why I'm upset about this and I didn't know it before. But what's most important is that you see it and that you re-own it. You don't necessarily have to understand where it comes from. All right, so the purpose of 3-2-1, there are two really clear objectives. And one is that you identify a projection, it's coming in the form of a disturbance, and that you're actually able to take back that projection. You're able to move it from the person that you have it on out there in the world, and you're able to take it back into first person and own it. So owning the projection is the first goal. The second one is that energetic shift that I talked about, because you're using your energy to keep something in place that would be better used to do something else. And so that energetic shift is the second thing. There are some other byproducts of doing the process. One is just what you're describing. You may have an insight. You may suddenly get, oh my gosh, I understand why this happened now. I understand that this is actually something that came from a message I received from my mother, or it came from an injury that I had with my first boyfriend that I'm playing out again. So an insight and the answer to why something's happening may emerge, which is great. Also, you'll find that in the process that almost inevitably you have more compassion and more empathy for the person that you're working with in the process. And sometimes a strategy for dealing with the problem or dealing with the disturbance actually comes up too. You may actually come up with a strategy for how to work with it. So those are kind of extra. You know, the insight, the compassion, and the strategies are all extra. They're all icing on the cake. But the thing that we're most interested in is owning the projection, taking it back, and also making that energetic shift so that you're freed up. All right. So let's just move into the process then, and we'll do it, and then you'll have a lot more questions at the end, and we'll field those at the end as well. It's very challenging to spot unconscious material if it's not conscious, right? Yeah. So how do we do it? How is it that we actually are able to locate what it is that's unconscious in us or is latent in our awareness? Just look to your environment. And wherever there's a disturbance, and as I said earlier, either a positive or a negative disturbance, you can pretty well guess that has something to do with you. And as I said earlier, because there are always things that we prefer, there are always things we don't like, there are always things we could change. And there probably isn't a person in this room who, if we got working on it, we wouldn't change certain things about you. But why I'm upset about one quality in one person and not the other 48 that are manifesting simultaneously. So that's the best place to look for it. So when we do the exercise, as a way of starting, we're going to start with looking at a person. And you don't have to understand necessarily why you're upset. Basically, you're just going to look at that person, you're going to describe them, and you're going to talk about why that person is upsetting to you. Keeping in mind it can be positive or it can be negative. And we're going to write about that in third person. That's going to be our first step. Okay? Are you on board? So what I'm going to do is ask you to think about a person who is disturbing to you for whatever reason. And while you're doing that, I'm actually going to read to you my entry from my journal. Okay? So we're going to write about it in third person. We're going to start as far out as possible, and we're basically going to describe the story or the narrative, and just using your 5 sense perceptions, talk about why this person's upsetting. And one of your challenges is going to be that in our time, in our culture, we have a big bias against having these kinds of irritations. So the minute I start to bring it into my awareness, another part of me is going to say, judge myself for having that experience. So you have to overcome that to begin with. So this is your opportunity not only to tell the story, but it's also your opportunity to complain. Okay, so you get to complain. So, this is my example. So Jane is bothering me again. I really enjoy working with her, but she's pleasant, she's competent, she's hardworking, she's reliable. But whenever we socialize together, we go out for a drink with a couple of colleagues, or we end up at a party, I don't enjoy her. I don't like her. And I feel bad saying it, but my perspective is that Jane is emotionally needy, and I feel burdened by her. So, does everybody hear the judgment? Okay. And inevitably, it's just the way it works out. I inevitably end up sitting next to her, and she has trouble getting into the conversation, and I feel compelled to help her out, to make conversation, to include her, and basically I resent it. I don't like it. Okay? So that will be the first. We're going to do basically 3 exercises, and the first is going to be just to describe the person in third person. Okay? And then we're going to move into second person. Okay? So in second person, the exploration is going to take the form of a dialogue. So when I move this whole thing from third person to second person, basically, what am I doing? There's a very significant thing that's happening when I do that. What is it?
Taking the other person's perspective.
I have to take their perspective as I imagine it, and I'm making a relationship, right? We're moving into we together, where before she was out there, and now she and I are having a conversation. So that's a big step to take. Okay, so basically it's going to take the dialogue form, and I'll ask you to begin by writing your name, your script first, okay? So Diane, Jane, I need to talk to you. I don't like it, but I always feel when I'm with you like it's my job to take care of you. When we socialize, I feel pressure to include you in the conversation, and I don't like it. It's a burden to me. And Jane says, well, who gave you that job? I don't think I did. I mean, I enjoy talking to you, and I like your company, but the last thing I need is you doing something with me that you don't want to do. And actually, as I think about it, it hurts my feelings. And so then I said to her, Diane, I'm sorry, I don't mean to hurt your feelings. And she says, well, how about we just free each other? I'll give you the freedom to be yourself, and maybe you just do the same for me. And you don't have to take care of me all the time. And I said to her, are you sure? And she says, definitely. So that was interesting. Okay, so finally, the third move that we're going to make is to move into first-person perspective. So when I write, this time I'm going to be writing it from Jane's perspective, as Jane. Okay? And I'm going to write about the situation as though I were them. Okay? So I'm Jane. I have a really good scene at my work. I enjoy my job, and I really enjoy the people I work with. I'm not always at ease socially because the people I work with are really quick. They're verbal, and they're witty, and sometimes I feel when we talk that the express train just blew through the station and I'm left standing on the platform. I don't mind it though. They're funny, and I really enjoy their company a lot. Everybody except Diane. She's a bit of a busybody. Yeah.
How much of a concern is it that you'd still be projecting when you're trying to speak as their first person? Because you can never really know the person you're talking about's first person perspective.
That's right.
So
That's right.
how much subconscious material is still in that?
Right. That's a big concern, particularly as you make the move from third person to second, because you're starting to imagine what they would say. And so there's always an anxiety that, in fact, that probably isn't what they would say, and how could I know what they would say anyway? And you can't, but basically, this is an exploration of your mind. And what you'll find is that when you start to speak as that person, that new things emerge that you wouldn't expect. Like when she said to me in my dialogue, basically, I never ask you to do that. You don't have to do it. It never even occurred to me. So even though she may not have said that, that was very freeing to me. And it actually created respect in me for her. So even though that may not have come from her, and maybe she would have said something entirely different, I still am having a positive benefit from having imagined something she might say. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Why would you want to journal through this process or use 3-2-1 instead of just approaching her?
If I approach her direct, I mean, there's so much that's shifted through my doing this, including setting her free, including gaining more respect for her perspective. If I do the 3-2-1 first, a lot of the emotional charge that I'm carrying about it is going to be drained off. And if I do feel like I need to talk to her, I'm going to do it in a way where there's just less energetic pressure.